There we go.
Yep, fantastic. Welcome. We see you, and you've got 10 minutes with us.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, I don't think I'll take that long, but tēnā koutou, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I'm speaking as chair of the members and supporters of Kiwis for the Treaty, which opposes the Regulatory Standards Bill. We're a diverse group of New Zealanders. We've got everything from students through to doctors, farmers, lawyers, builders, etc., and across the country. But our key sort of unifying interest is that we believe the treaty is a key way of unifying New Zealand and making us more successful. We're not aligned with any political parties on either side. In fact, our members have voted for every single party. In terms of background, my work has been in private investment, corporate management, and originally as an RMA lawyer. I'm also a fifth-generation Pākehā New Zealander. There's two things I really wanted to talk about. One was some of the principles that have been drafted, and secondly, just to maybe walk through a scenario of how the bill could be used, because I think there's a
Oh, was it just me, or did we lose him?
I've lost him on my screen as well.
Someone pushed the red share button.
It's not there.
Okay, we'll give him a minute to come back. Otherwise, we have to re-jostle him.
Can you see it?
Yep, you're back.
I don't know what happened there. Anyway, yeah, okay. So look, in terms of the first issue, I suppose when we look at the way the bill has been drafted, it puts great weight on including the rule of law, and of course everyone would agree with that. So it's a key provision throughout England, Europe, and the Commonwealth. But the interesting bit is when you get to the equality principle, which really deals with majorities and minorities, it says every person is equal before the law, and we've heard that repeated a lot on TV. We get that, but actually what it's failed to do is it fails to reflect the actual principle that was set out by senior English judge Lord Bingham in 2006. And why that matters is because the actual principle, the rule of law about equality, which most of the English-speaking world at least follows, says that it has an extra part to that same sentence, which says, save to the extent that objective differences justify differentiation. So that's a proviso to say that in a democracy, you will have minorities of all sorts of people. It might be Maori, it might be fishermen, it might be, I don't know, raft of things, crochet knitters, I don't know. But the point is, that is the exception to the rule of equality. So when people have an objective difference, that should be provided for. And so I don't know why that's missing in this legislation. Maybe someone from that party can explain why they chose to only put half the sentence in, but they did. But its absence will have a profound effect on minorities. And its absence will, I'm sure, raise eyebrows across the Commonwealth and further as to why this New Zealand, who has been a well-known democracy, has decided to jettison the very core part of its rule of law. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about was the international treaty principle. One of the other principles that Lord Bingham set out was that as part of the existing principle, the rule of law requires compliance by the state with its obligations in international law. The law, which, whether deriving from treaty or international custom and practice, governs the conduct of nations. And then he said, I do not think this proposition is contentious. Neither should it be. But again, it's not there at all in this legislation. And again, why has there been a bit of a cut and paste job on this and a selective editing? Accident or intentional, I don't know. But if it's there, then it just reminds the government and reminds the Regulatory Standards Board that there is an international treaty obligation, and it's the obligation under the Treaty of Waitangi, which by anyone's reckoning was and still is an international treaty that we're bound by. So again, ACT may or may not have a rationale as to why they chose to do that. Now, the second thing that I really want to talk about is just really this issue of, well, what does it all mean? And I think everyone's got a bit confused on that, including myself at times. But I've decided I'll try and run scenarios to say, well, if we get this legislation, what could happen? And I suppose one of the key things for a select committee is the job of spotting the wolf in sheep's clothing. So it's crucial that the select committee spots bills that look nice and friendly but can cause havoc if they're enacted. And that's an issue that with societies that's gone right back to the days of when Christ delivered his Sermon on the Mount and he mentioned the wolf in sheep's clothing. That's where it comes from. Well, I would argue that this bill is one of those ravenous wolves, which if passed will make it much easier for the government to do things such as sell public land, strategic businesses and state-owned assets. And some commentators have argued that actually is the really true rationale for this whole piece of legislation, and why it's been pushed so hard for so long is because of the interest of some parts of the economy in accessing those assets, or people from overseas accessing them. Because there's no actual reason to do it. We know the current system works very well. We've got government departments saying it works very well, and we've had international agencies saying that it works very well. In fact, we've got one of the best quality of regulation globally. So then I suppose the question was, okay, well, whatever, let's see what would happen if you decided to do something like sell Palmu, which has been talked about for a long time, and it could be transfer, one's worth 2 billion, one's worth 5 billion, they're quite material to any government's budget. So Palmu, big business, 110 farms, 360,000 hectares, 1,000 staff. Variety of crops, one of its core purposes is to hold land for possible transfer to iwi in future treaty settlements. So I was like, well, okay, what's a realistic thing that could happen? Well, the government could get an offer, say 2 billion from an overseas agricultural fund, and that offer is conditional on Palmu's assets, all of their assets, and the transaction being completed quickly. So what's the response? You get farmers who say, no, that land should be sold to us in New Zealand, we're the best people to do it, and we don't have enough time under the overseas investment. You've got environmentalists who say, oh, these people are terrible, and you get Māori saying this land was meant to be protected for us. But the government says, no, we've got to keep going. They know there's an issue with the State-Owned Enterprises Act, and they know there's an issue with the Overseas Investment Act. But by pushing this legislation through to enable this act to happen, the Minister of Regulation is able to advise Parliament that the liberty principle says that they should be able to sell those assets. The treaty is not relevant. There's no relevant criteria. Social impact on farms is not relevant. Potential environmental effects are not relevant. So there's no good reason for this not to go ahead. And then you go, oh, that's the wolf in sheep's clothing, and it's arrived, and it would have a dramatic effect on New Zealand economy when you start putting those level of types of transactions together without the public being involved. So not saying it's a right or wrong thing to do this types of sales, but if it happens, it needs to be one that considers all the issues across all the groups, and then the Parliament can make its decision. So now that's submissions. I hope they're of some help.
Thank you for that. Yep, we are nearly at time, so we'll leave it there.
Shame there's no questions on that one. It'll be interesting if there was some probing, and I do think Mark Cameron got a monopoly on questions that day.
Yeah,
very perplexing questions too.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I was appreciate the direct examples he was giving, direct hypotheticals he was going into. Not necessarily that I 100% followed them beat for beat. A lot of minute details in there that I wasn't necessarily
Like
aware
Lane
of.
Corp.
Sorry?
Lane Corp.
Yeah.
Which
How many minutes did he take to explain the rule of law in that submission? Explain what he meant by that and its effects. It's just that is one of the principles, and like all of the rest of them that are in that legislation, there is so much that underneath those, and they boil down to beliefs. It all boils down to what you believe. But some of them are quite sexy, terms to fall in love with instantly. Like, who's going to argue that liberties are something that we don't want in our law? We don't, as people taking liberties.
So yeah, so you sort of, I think, partly that's been my biggest gripe with this entire bill. Is you kind of hit the hammer on the nail on the head there with the hammer. Is the terms and the lack of actual justifications of these terms. When it comes to principles-based laws, they're typically best when anchored to existing legal frameworks. I just got a list here that I sort of had put up to get some of the definitions in this bill, such as good justification, which is not at all defined in the entire bill. But if you go, example, to the New Zealand Public Finance Act of 89, it's defined via the detailed fiscal responsibilities of principled cabinet manual references. Fair compensation is, again, not defined at all. It's explicitly referenced, again, in that same bill, tied to the Land Act and Public Works Act, stuff like that, where you can't just say these terms and expect everyone agrees on them. You need to outline what they actually mean, rather than leave them up to vague interpretation.
But isn't that partly and I hate to say it, but the genius of our opposition? I mean, sorry, I mean, David Seymour is a formidable opponent if you are
Yeah.
on the left, and I think it's by these really innocuous terms that he uses. Everything it just seems like another day, right? Down to when the bill was introduced. It's down to the title of the bill. For a good 3 months, I kept forgetting the name of the actual bill because it was so vanilla. And I think that's all by design. And I think not defining those words is also by design because it gives much more leeway for them to be able to define that any which way that they choose. And that kind of, even the one thing that which I've never understood from the beginning is how no media has jumped on this idea of the idea of bad policy versus good policy. That's the overarching kind of, he says, is the overarching goals. And it's like, I'm a service designer, and one of our tenets is if you're going to have a solution, it's got to fix a problem. And there's been no point have they defined what that problem is. They're not saying, you've got people like Eric Crampton saying it's all about finance and ability for the country to make more money and kind of productivity, but they haven't said what exactly is the problem that they're trying to fix and how they go about fixing it. It's just, you've just got these innocuous sounding kind of principles.
It's like they're finding the solutions, but they've yet to find the problem to marry the solution to.
Yep.
Yeah.
While not fixing the problems that are probably already out there. I mean, let's take a look at work and income. You're required to take a job on Saturday, Sunday, but how are you meant to know that you're meant to work if you've got to report those wages on Friday for the Saturday and Sunday you don't know you're yet working for?
Yeah, and David's right when it comes to public interpretation too. That's a lot of I think the tactic here is like, who's going to argue with fair compensation, especially with the fuss that people are making about this bill, and then people from the public go and probably read it or look it up and just see good justification and fair compensation and equality for all in the law. Like, it's people are probably, wow, well, that sounds reasonable.
Will Philip Morris end up having like a lovely little text break out? Yes, we agree. Won't nudge to Casey Costello, but then say you have an iwi who suddenly has raw sewage poured into their backyard, and it'll be like, nah, you're going to have to sit there and fight through the courts for it and drag it out for 10 years.
If you just even use ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT what defines private property. There's about it can be boiled down to about 10 different categories. It's a very, very porous kind of subjective.
Well, they do kind of define it in this bill, don't they? Because they're really only talking about private property rights, and that cuts out quite a lot of types of property rights. Collective property rights, for example, which
Absolutely.
is a big cultural clash for Māori.
Yes.
That's the whole thing is predicated on the idea that universally applicable principles can be agreed to assess whether existing laws or proposed laws are good and responsible. And they are using effective buzz terms, efficiency, but they miss out a whole lot of really important terms as well that equally are not universally understood but are equally important, like justice, for example, security. How about peace, intercultural peace, social peace? How about reconciliation?
Yeah.
I'm actually taking these from Jeffrey Palmer's group's submission. Minimising harm, that's a good term. Everyone would agree to that.
Yeah.
Wise stewardship, ecological integrity.
Yeah.
So we need to actually flesh out, if this is going to survive in any form, it needs to be gutted off its simplicity. Or its
as you can see, when I typed into ChatGPT, define private property rights, and this is what it brings up.
Sorry, I've got to look again.
It's very small, isn't it?
It's very little.
Oh, just a moment. There is this lovely thing called...
Could, for instance, your view be defined as a property right? Outside your window, your ability to make money, is that a private property right?
Well, what about resources that are collectively held? So we call it held rather than owned, like water, which, to be honest, the National historical national parties have resisted the idea that water is owned. But I think that masks the fact that it is, in fact, subject to a range of property rights, which are owned by pastoral landholders, agriculturalists who are doing irrigation projects, and other users, industrial users, and extractors of water, and that those are sets of property rights. Just because you don't have a particular title to it, doesn't mean that you can't exclude everybody else's access to it and ruin everybody else's access to it.
Right.
Value it in cost-benefit analysis solely for its economic and financial elements, and not consider the range of other elements that people actually do value about water, which is the other big flaw in this legislation, is its cost-benefit analysis. Because cost-benefit analysis does very badly with environmental externalities, environmental effects, anything downstream, anything long-term, and quite a lot of things that are local. I mean, that's just one of the problems with cost-benefit analysis.
If I recall correctly, too, I remember Seymour talking about this in an interview where he was actually discussing like vehicles and like just things people own. So this goes beyond, I think, just actual like property as in housing. It goes to private property as in my glass here is my own private property. He seemed to imply it extended to all types of things down to those minute details from the way he was talking about it. So someone's boat, private property would be probably applicable to a lot of these situations, as far as I see it.
Well, if you're a fish, are you valued for your flesh in the supermarket, which is the essence of what probably this bill intends for the life of a fish? Are you valued for its contribution to the ecology, which we often don't really know about well enough, and it's very difficult to monetize? Or are you the future boy fishing with his dad? Are you valued for that, which is also part of the human context of what fisheries are for, let alone intrinsic value of fish as species?
Yeah. I've never really written a policy in my life, but you would have heard so many who are against the bill talking about the idea that this bill wouldn't have got passed underneath its own regulations. And it does strike me that it surely, if you're creating policy for all New Zealanders, you need that specificity. It's madness to me that it's so open to interpretation. It's like,
well, and David Seymour, as the minister, will be the one introducing it into the House, and he's going to be the one who gets to make the speech, which ends up in Hansard, which ends up in court.
Got it.
And actually
argues about the definition of all of those terms. So he's going to have so many bites at the cherry in terms of how that is influenced.
And actually, you are right on that, considering all the government speeches, except for David Seymour's, were seat warmer speeches of less than a minute, including Casey Costello. And Casey Costello is a very good speech person in Parliament. It was just like, we commend this bill to the House, and sits down. And it was just like, what the hell? Because I've never seen that happen on bills before. This one was literally, act was pipe. All the opposition ones were rabbiting on away for the maximum allocated time, and the government was like, hi there, I commend the bill to the House, and sit straight down.
What does that tell you, Sam?
It's a trash piece of law.
What would happen if? How do you get? Did anybody submit that National should make it a conscience vote?
No.
I don't think I remember hearing that.
That's the power of that being a coalition agreement, I guess. But that's how you get the potential for expression of views, other than that pretty robotic, because my boss agreed to this so that we could have a government up, down, sitting thing. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah. Let's get to our next